Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live, our weekly podcast here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Appreciate everyone joining us. Good morning, Hawk. Glad to see you already with us, and look forward to hearing from others. And just as a reminder to share where you're joining from when you join us, and so that we can recognize our audience. Also, be sure to uh, let us know if you have questions and comments. Welcome, Gladstone. Glad to see you with us as well. Okay, and Panda, glad to see you from India, and glad to have you here. And as we start each show, want to talk a bit about how we see wisdom and what our understanding is. Wisdom's a journey, it's not an event. Wisdom is something that we start by gaining knowledge, and that starts very early on. Even as a child, we begin to learn knowledge about the world around us, and we gain that knowledge and hopefully the perspectives from it, and begin that journey and keep going. In fact, even today, I seek to learn new things each day. And then the second step in that process is to then gain understanding. The understanding is what we gain in our experience, taking the knowledge that we have and putting it to use in our life. Excuse me. And that's where understanding comes in. Welcome, Eunice. So glad to have you this morning. Eric, glad to have you with us as well. And then the third step in the wisdom journey is when we take our knowledge and our understanding and we begin to look at it from a much bigger picture, including and especially outside of ourselves. And so that as we consider using our knowledge and our understanding well, we certainly then consider not only its effect on us, but those around us, and consider not just the effects immediately around us, but even into a bigger perspective. So that's about our wisdom journey. And the for those of us that have a spiritual bent, one of the ways we also look at it is that we are seeking to see things through God's eyes and use what we've learned and apply it from that perspective, so that it is um, goes to being about helping one another as we go along in this journey called life. And I appreciate that Panda shares that we have to be a learner in life. Indeed, no doubt. And let's see here. Eunice comments that gaining wisdom takes time, but everyone has the capacity to become wiser. In fact, Eunice, not only do we have the capacity, we have the promise that if we seek it and ask for it, that we will get it from our Creator. And then Panda comments, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. Love is friendship that has caught fire. Perfection is impossible. Just strive to do your best. I especially like your line there that if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. As long as we don't let perfection slow us down and bog us down. Good morning, Karen from Florida. Glad to have you as always. So, our topic I am been watching discussions about bosses and managers and leaders over time, and looking at the different perspectives on what those people do in their role. And sometimes that role can be, those roles can overlap, And sometimes the primary difference in those roles is the attitude and mindset that the person in those roles approaches it. So let's see. And let's Hawk makes a comment. Individuals have the potential to become wiser. Systems and institutions seem to have a lot of a resistance. Uh, yes, I understand your comment. Uh, the systems tend to be a much bigger ship, so it's harder to change direction with it. And the challenge is within systems that the wisdom has to be more collective, and it takes time, and people are at different places in their wisdom journey, so that makes the systems more challenging. Welcome to Juana and Richard. Glad to have you all with us. And excuse me. And then Eunice comments that while there are many qualities of a leader that companies value, it's wisdom in business management that can have a profound effect, not only on the bottom line, but also on those who supports the company's mission. I agree with you, Eunice, that wisdom, I think, is one of the qualities that's lacking in our businesses, and in terms of being able to work well with the people that we employ. And I think a lack of wisdom in our leadership and in our businesses, and that is a contributing factor to the shifts we're seeing in the workforce, and we're going to continue to see. Richard makes the comment that excellent does not require perfection. Agree completely with you there, Richard. I do agree, though, that chasing perfection is not a bad thing as long as we understand that we'll never catch it. But as I believe it was Eunice said, we have the potential to catch excellence in the meantime. Welcome, Zaid. So glad to see you this morning. And so let's look at Gladstone's comment, and he kind of gives a segue into the topic. Says, I have found that the word leader, manager, or boss is used by quite a few without knowing its full understanding. Unless the baseline is clear, it will end up in confusion. Gladstone, you are very right. In fact, the challenge we face in a lot of ways, and the reason that I take the time to do polls on LinkedIn is for that very reason. We use words with each other a lot of times, not really considering what they mean and the connotations that go with them. And as a result, we have confusion, and not uncommon that we raise emotional response and questions that can factor in and become either a point of growth or a point of contention, or both. So it's something that we certainly need to continue to work on, is understanding what we're saying, what our words mean, and how we use them. So definitely, I know we did an episode on not just being an effective communicator, but being a wise communicator. And it's part of it is for that very reason. Okay, so Eunice says, wise leaders have certain leadership skills that transcend the everyday requirements of a job. I believe so, Eunice. I think that anybody that is in a role in organization or in their family or whatever needs to be seeking wisdom so that they can fulfill those roles better and wiser. And the value of that is just truly remarkable, and something that we should all consider. And I really hope that it motivates us to seek out the wisdom in our lives individually, so that we are able to make better choices and learn and grow more. And since we're seeking, we can grow wiser quicker if we are making the effort. Gladstone says, despite the difference between the three roles, I believe that the most important consideration is ethics. I think it certainly has to be a consideration, Gladstone, that regardless of what title you hold, position, role, whatever, ethics is got to be there. If not, it creates a whole nother set of problems for us and for others. And so, yes, that is very important. And Zaid comments, I would say perfection equals Kaizen. That's continuous development of the product or service. The good friend of mine, Max Story, who is part of, or the originator of blue collar leadership, uses Kaizen very regularly. And yes, it's a good process to help us get to be where we need to be. And it is, when intentional, it moves us there more quickly each time. And then Gladstone offers doing the right thing, even if none demands it, differentiates real leaders from the rest. I agree with you, Gladstone, that and what you're talking about is a look at servant leadership, because I don't think you can be a servant leader without being ethical. I think it goes part and parcel with being a servant leader. And let's see. And Eric comments, great leaders accept a little of the credit and more than their fair share of the blame. Indeed, I agree with you, Eric. Another way I've heard it expressed is that leaders are quick to give credit and quick to receive blame. And it's a mark of a servant leader, no doubt about it. Welcome, Sandas. Glad to have you with us today and look forward to hearing from you. And Richard comments that a good leader, a really good one, is not concerned with how others see him or her. They understand well that they have a very real and what might be described as an awesome responsibility to tend to the needs of those who are there to serve. And a key element in there, Richard, is responsibility. I know that some people that take training, leadership training from me, think that I have really an extreme responsible view of things. And as leaders, I believe that we should be very cognizant and accepting of those responsibilities, because at the end of the day, leaders have the role, position, the power to have great effect on people, and how they use it is definitely a great responsibility. Great responsibility. Okay, Sandas comments, a boss with great managerial qualities and leadership qualities is always welcome. I agree with you, Sandas. What's been interesting is the cultural views of the three roles, and especially the term boss. I think that sometimes we get a little overwrought with the titles, and in fact, an effective leader really doesn't concern themselves with titles. They concern themselves with doing what needs to be done for both their people and the people that they are working for, and of course, at moments themselves as well. What I find interesting from a connotation is that bosses quite often are perceived as the ones with authority, and that unfortunately quite often misuse that authority. And if you look at all the caricatures and cartoons and memes, they show the boss even in light of almost like using a whip to get people to do what they want to do. And obviously, the connotations are uncaring and selfish and even arrogant at times. And so, looking at what the meanings of the terms are as we have conversation becomes important. I think it interesting. I've got a poll going about right now about bosses and managers and leaders, and to see the various perspectives on those roles and how they are filled and what they entail is insightful to me, and so it's rather interesting to consider. So let's see here. Eunice comments, I don't know if this is outside the scope. If the word boss is not right, why do we still use it? Good question. The word boss, I don't know the history of it, and it is a word. In fact, let me do something here. Let's see here. Now I'm going to be working on the fly here. Let's see if I can get away with it. And let's just see what is the current view of the word boss. And let's see first, see if we can get a definition. Let's see. What's really interesting is I'm looking for definition of boss, and it automatically takes me to a comparison of the bosses versus leaders. So bear with me just a moment. Let's see if we can get a dictionary definition of what a boss is. And let's see, Merriam-Webster says, let me share this with you guys so that you get to see what I'm looking at. Okay. All right. So let's see what the dictionary says. Let me make this a little larger because I know it may not be readily visible. All right. Let's see. I think that'll do it. A boss is a person who exercises control or authority, and in politics, one who controls votes in a party organization or dictates appointments or legislative measures. And then as a verb, as in bossing someone or whatever, is to give usually arbitrary orders to, and usually used with around, like boss around, to exercise control or authority over, to act as a boss. Let's see. Okay. And as an adjective, they're referring to it as slang, which means excellent, first rate. And then noun, an ornamental portrayal. Okay. So we see, I think one of the key things in the context that we are speaking of is the first definition we see here, and that is a person who exercises control or authority. And I think that is one of the key elements in that relationship. And is it wrong to exercise authority? I don't think so. I think there are some inherent challenges in our current culture to exercising authority. And even in my military, I know there is a shift in approach. We, within military environments, we have rank and established chain of command or order of authority that is there. But even in the military, we have shifted and began to consider the value of leadership based not solely or especially on authority. So, Eunice, to your question, why do we still use it? It is because it has more than just a negative um, context or connotation involved. And it's something that is still part of our language. I think we just need to consider how we use it and then how we claim it. The other thing is people claim the title of boss. And uh, unfortunately, if they claim the title, it's a good possibility that they're going to function primarily in an authority role, and a lot of different considerations in there. So Richard comments in response to Eunice, I don't think boss is the wrong word. A person can be a boss. They just need to be a good one. And Richard, you've hit on something that is a key component is being a good boss, manager, leader, whatever is the goal or should be the goal every time. I know, again, boss, because of the way it has been in our past, in our traditions, has evolved with a negative connotation. Although, again, it's not, it's just a word that has a particular meaning. And when you take away the connotations, there are places that it can be used, no doubt about it. And then we have a comment here. Oh, let's see here. Gladstone, I believe it is. Yeah, comments leaders must have. Leaders master the art of enabling teams to lead themselves. Yeah, leadership is about more about inspiration, motivation, and influence than it is about authority. And that's one of the big differences between a boss and a leader is how they approach getting people to do what is needed to be done or what the person needs them to do. So that's a real delineation between those two. And let's see, Gladstone shares a little levity there. On a lighter note, however wise you may be, the boss will believe otherwise. Yeah, unfortunately, that is quite often the way a traditional boss sees things, that maybe they're got it over on everyone else, regardless if we think we've got some wisdom to offer. And the humor there also gives us insight into how we see bosses in our current culture. Zaid has a question. Since when corporations started to use leadership to levels of management from supervisor to the CEO? When this change happened, instead of saying low level, mid level, and top level managers, since most of these people don't have any leadership skills? It's an interesting question, Zaid, because the whole shift in structure in corporations, big businesses especially, has gone from being primarily a vertical design, which means that you have low level people, mid level people, and top level people. And what has been going on now for a while is an effort to, rather than having a vertical organizational structure, is to move towards I guess, a horizontal structure or a circular structure, so that everyone has their value and their role in the organization. And the some of the companies like Zappos, and I believe that in some regards Google and some of them are trying to get away from that vertical organizational structure And with that shift becomes a, a challenge in both titles and defining roles, because again, the traditional organizational structure is more about you're a entry or frontline manager or leader, whatever, and then you have the mid-level or manager, leader, etc., and then your top tier group or C-suite and all that. So it's some challenges that we are currently dealing with in the workforce, and we're still really trying to sort it out. And as a result, and part of the reason we're even talking about this today, is that we're trying to understand the terminology to be able to work within the environment and communicate about it. And what we've got to do, I think, is that we've got to, rather than looking at it purely from a knowledge or understanding data analytics type of view, that now we need to step back and seek to find wisdom in it, both to understand how it all fits together, plus to consider the impact that it has in our culture and on us individually, on our organizations, and try to sort through and come to some common ground on it. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're dealing with currently. So, good question. There has been a shift. It has definitely occurred. Right now, culturally, bosses are considered a negative view, if you will. And that's because as a culture, we have shifted away from the whole concept of authority. For my generation, we were very authority driven and operated within that environment. And it was reasonably effective, still wasn't ideal, but it worked for our generation for a long time. One of the challenges that we have now is that we have not made shifts and adjustments in our organizations to match the cultural need demand. And that's part of the reason that we're seeing what is being called the Great Resignation and so on. So a lot of growth opportunity there that we need to work on. And your other part of your comment, Zaid, was that we have a lot of people in different roles that lack leadership skills, and I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And there's even a debate: are leaders born, or are they do they learn and are trained? And I believe it's actually a combination of the two. But one of the challenges or fallacies or problems we have in the workforce structures that we're dealing with, and it's partly because of the confusion in and around the changes and evolution that's occurring. But one of the things that we do commonly is that we take someone that is good at a task. Excuse me, keep getting a frog in my throat this morning. Sorry about that. Anyway, we keep approaching people that we've assigned a task, and they are very good at that task, whatever it is, in their job. And then the primary way we recognize those people is to say, okay, well, if you're really good at that task, then we're going to promote or put you in charge of other people that do that task. And we make that transition in the workforce and in ways that we approach, in my opinion, unwisely, because as you've observed, Zaid, we do not know if, first of all, they want to be leaders. And I know that There are a lot of people that don't want to be leaders, but they'll take the promotion because it's the only way to get promoted. It's the only way to grow, quote unquote, in your career. And then the other thing is that we put these people in leadership roles, and we do so without even considering or assessing, are they leaders naturally, or do they have skills, or do we need to train them, and so on. And it's another problem that we've got in the workforce, and it's a challenge that we've got to overcome. And it's back to this whole concept of the Great Resignation. Our lack of ability and or willingness to deal with some of these things is where at least an impetus for the workforce challenges we're facing. So thanks for that good question and comment. So let's see. Eunice comments, wise leaders understand choices and their impact on the world around them. Authenticity creates opportunity. I agree with you, Eunice, that the value of being wise, gaining wisdom as a leader, is that you can see more about the choices and the choices we should make and their impact and so on. And and an element of authenticity within leadership helps to be a part of motivating and inspiring people to follow us, no doubt. And let's see here. Richard makes a comment, a person does not have to be a manager to have leadership skills. It's an interesting thing, and I'm going to see if I can go back to it. When I took strategic planning training a few years back, our instructor made a comment that I agreed completely, is that you can be a good manager without being a great leader, but you, I'm sorry, yeah, but you cannot be a great manager without being a great leader. And I think I'm butchering it, but sorry about that. But the point is that these roles don't require necessarily the same type and level of skills in their very nature. For example, a boss, we looked up the word boss, and the style attributed there, or the quality, is one of authority. And if you have authority, and if you have people that recognize and accept your authority, then having leadership skills or even management skills are not as critical, because you can direct people to do something and do it without question, including picking people to take care of management duties, which management and leadership qualities are different. And I'll dig into that a little more. But yes, you can be a manager and even do so pretty well, and but not have leadership skills. But with that in mind, you have to consider what a manager does, or who they are engaged with, because without the leadership skills, they have other challenges. Let's see. Gladstone comments, says one of the indicators to know the difference manager, boss, leader is if the person is promoting a toxic work culture. And Gladstone, I agree that that indeed, especially with the connotations, understandings we have of the titles, that the toxicity of the culture indicates the style of role, the style of filling that role. Okay, because again, part of the reason boss currently has a negative connotation is a lot of bosses, because of the nature of only using authority tend to be considered as uh, creating toxic environments because they don't allow as much input. They don't value people as much. They're more of a commodity rather than a person. And so, yeah, it is a good observation that the culture reflects the type and style of direction that is used by the people in those roles. And so let's see. Okay, Hawk asked, what is a true boss? In my humble opinion, quite simply, someone who, as you said, Kevin, takes blame for all that goes wrong and passes on praise to workers. And that's what's interesting. And again, what we need to consider is that can there be a good boss? Certainly, we have known them. But what I have begun to do to try to clarify communication is to reshape our use of the words and recognize the how they behave and perform. And so, with that said, let me share a bit of what I think is culturally and practically become the differences between the three, and then we'll go on and discuss and share as to uh, the relative value and need of the roles. But as we saw from definition from the dictionary, is that a boss is someone that relies primarily on authority to accomplish what needs to happen. And and that again, for my generation, that was the normal way of functioning within organization. You had bosses at different levels, and they were given people to accomplish goals, and those goals were driven by the authority of the boss, and required that the boss have um, a greater knowledge and understanding, and they carried a lot of responsibility because they are the boss. They have the ultimate authority in that organization. And culturally, for us, the key phrase that was a part of that boss culture is if there was disagreement or needed to bring things back into focus or direction, the boss would just say, we're going to do this because I said so. And that was considered acceptable and part of what we did. That was the culture that we were accustomed to and we had even submitted to. Um, and so that is boss. Manager, okay, again, I tell you what, let's just for good measure here, let's see what the dictionary says about a manager. And I always think this helps because this is theoretically the official word on meanings of a of words. So let's see what the dictionary says about a manager. It says a person responsible for controlling or administering all or part of a company or similar organizations. Um, a person who controls the activities, business dealings, and other aspects of the career of an entertainer, and a person in charge of activities such as tactics and training of a sports team, and so on. So, manager, one of the primary things that we see related to manager by definition is being able to handle or direct different aspects of the business. And whether the business is that of an entertainer or a sports person, or it's in regards to the organization. And in fact, a lot of manager skills are about organization and tracking and keeping things in a fashion that can be followed, tracked, and documented, and so on. And it's a needed part of any business, because at the end of the day, regardless of whether we are a solopreneur or we're a multinational company with thousands and thousands of employees, we have to keep up with data. We have to have things organized and managed and controlled, without a doubt, because without those, you're not able to assess where you're at and have you reached goals, things like that. So a manager is much about organizing and putting things in the right places at the right times, and so on. And so, again, I hope that helps a little bit. And then the last thing is a leader. And let's look up, same trend. I should have had this up and ready, but sometimes we do things better on the fly. So, what is a leader according to the dictionary? And according to the dictionary, a leader is the person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country. Leader, example, leader of a protest group. So leader is different in nature from a boss, in that it doesn't focus on authority per se. And then I will share, if I can bring it up here. I have been gathering quotes over time, and I continue to gather those quotes that I have found myself using, and that these are all original quotes that I use. And here is one that helps me kind of grasp a more of an understanding of what leadership is about. And I'm going to share it in the comments. And I don't know if everyone can see those, but and let's see here. So to make sure everyone can see this, because I know we have a lot of people that are visual, including myself. So let me get the quote up here and share it with you. And it's right here. It says, leadership is the actions and attitudes displayed by one individual while reaching their full potential that inspires others to reach their full potential as they both pursue a shared vision. So that's kind of one of my perspectives on leadership. So again, trying to understand if there are differences between bosses, managers, and leaders is what we're after today, and gain some wisdom and additional insight, so that as we communicate about those roles and how they're approached, we can then better communicate, better function, and even better be able to come to a place where we can work together. Okay, Zaid comments that mostly from my observation, no leadership training is offered. Rather, more training in the function is given, but new leaders are left gaining experience while managing their team. Yes, again, Zaid, you're on target there, because we rarely train people as we promote them into these roles. And if we give them anything, it may be a little bit of training, and mostly they've got to gain it as they are, shall we say, on the job training, if you will. Let's see here. And okay, let me get lined up here, because again, the system's doing identifying some of you as LinkedIn users. And so I want to make sure that I tell who's saying what correctly. Gladstone makes comment, I think that intensity of will and personal humility still is the hallmark of great leaders. And I tend to agree with you, Gladstone, especially about humility. I think that to be a truly great leader and to impact our world positively, humility especially is a key element, and something that we have unfortunately gotten away from and has been lost in our culture. Welcome, Rafia. Glad to have you. Rafia sometimes joins us, and I'm glad to see she was able to join us today. So let's go on down. So Zaid makes comment, in a way, a boss would tell, go do it this way or else. A leader would ask you to something to the best of your, to do something the best of your ability, having in mind the leader understood your abilities and what you can do and your points of great strength. So your space of creativity is more open. Good insight, indeed, there, Zaid. What a Let me share a little bit about the concept and the shift that practically is in need of occurring in our workforce, and I have purposely and studied and tried to understand this, having dealt with it, and also being in the leadership space. But what we're seeing because of cultural shifts, not saying I agree with them or disagree with them, I just accept that they're so, that if a boss, as it's defined in the dictionary, is the way someone approaches their role, and they're primarily functioning in a place of authority, they're going to have a hard time functioning in the current environment, workforce environment, because as they approach it in that fashion, my generation and some of Generation X will respond at least reasonably well in that environment. But the tail end of the Generation X, as well as the Gen Y, Millennials, and Gen Zs, as you progress down the road with those generations, a boss, again, assuming we're talking someone operating primarily out of authority, are going to be less and less effective, because among those generations, authority, depending on which generation you talk about, down to your Gen Z's, authority is almost a foreign concept, because we have so shifted culturally in regards to what authority is or isn't, and whether it's even valid or valuable to a point. And part of what we see in our culture is a reaction to applied authority. And what's interesting is what is reflected out in the bigger world in response to authority, police versus protesters kind of thing, is a microcosm of the what we see culturally within the workforce and how that react. And most of the time, generations, including, again, tail end Gen X, Gen Y, Millennials, and Gen Zs, their response to authority is somewhat varied, but rarely is it a positive reaction. And again, agree or disagree whether it should be or not, it is the nature of what we're dealing with in the workforce. So the challenge with being a boss in terms of strict definition from the dictionary is that functioning by authority is limited anymore in its effectiveness. And it also, in the current culture workforce, creates some issues. It creates divides, and it's a real challenge. Okay. And then the other aspect during my generation is managers could manage both things, again, data and counting and keeping up with products and things like that. And they would apply their organizational approach to the what they needed to do, and would organize all that, but the same people under the strictest view of managing as an organizer would be applied to people. And the challenge that we've seen there is that a manager is going to typically put whatever they're managing, whether it's people or things, they're going to put them in boxes, lists, or categories and things like that. And there is some value on some level with that, especially valuable, though, with keeping up with the things, quote unquote, that we have to keep up with, no doubt. The challenge is to put people into our organizational structure of boxes, lists, what have you, doesn't work well, because by doing so, we tend to take out the human element involved. And that in order for people to fit in these boxes or in these lists or whatever, the assumption is that we're all the same and that we're functioning in the same way and we all have the same strengths and weaknesses. And the question becomes, can we get things done back up? So we've talked about a boss, we've talked about a manager. Can we accomplish what we need to without being a boss? And my thought is, yes, we can, generally speaking, because we can function and get things accomplished now, especially without using pure authority. Now, do we ever need to not have authority-based operation or direction? You can't go without it completely, because there are times, based on circumstances and situations, where someone just has to say it's going to be this way, whatever this way is, and make a decision so we can move forward. And part of that is determined by the urgency of the situation. Now, we try to excuse me, we are working, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations under the tyranny of the urgent. So we think we're always needing to use a boss type approach when it's not necessarily the case. It is an symptom. The tyranny of the urgent is a symptom that we've got people that are in charge of things that are approaching it as a boss, and they lack the organizational skill, if you will, of the manager. And so we have to consider, can we do things without having managers or manager skill sets? And I would say no, because it is necessary for an organization to function, to be able to organize, plan, and do things like that. And because if you don't, it creates confusion. It also becomes an issue in terms of surviving financially. So last quality or last role that we've been talking about is leadership. Can we operate everything purely as in a leadership environment? And as much as I believe in leadership and the function, excuse me, of leadership, I would say it would be possible, but not practical to be purely in a leadership environment. There could be some exceptions, but generally, what I think we've got to do, and I see you guys having to wrap up. I appreciate you hanging in there. I know you got to get on with your day. But ultimately, what I think that we need to do in our organizations is to shift from a an authority based culture in our organizations, and we need to prepare people that are moving up in ranks or changing roles to be working with other people in teams. Is that the goal is to be manager leaders, and so it's an interesting environment. And Richard, I guess a parting remark: leaders have to understand that there is a shift in consumer behaviors. In this case, those consumers are the people they lead, and that there's been a referendum offered in the workplace. Yeah, it's a real challenge that we're facing right now, and regardless of what title you hold or what role you're trying to take, that again, because of the shift in regards to authority, that now a lot of the conventions and traditions in the workforce are being challenged to a point that we're watching people take steps and saying, not going to put up with this if we don't change, and are part of this great resignation. A lot of elements in there, and maybe I will do a show in regards to that. The other thing, and I want to hit in our last few minutes, is to just make sure that we consider looking at these three roles: boss, manager, leader, and seek some wisdom among ourselves in order to know how to respond to people in these roles, because as we understand where they're coming from, we get a better sense of wise ways to interact and respond. For example, if you have have someone in a role that you have to interact with and deal with at work, that is a boss, somebody that primarily functions from authority, then the best way to be heard or to affect change is from a basis of respect, okay, as well as there's a principle, and we don't have time to get into it, but the principle is appealing to that boss, and rather than just stamping our foot and saying, I don't accept your authority, you can approach it in a way so as to affect how that person uses their authority. But how you approach it is very different than you would in terms of other qualities in the roles. With a manager, if you are working with someone that his primary function is as a manager, understand their way of doing or thinking is in organizational skills and putting things in the right list, the right boxes, the right categories, and so on. So if you're trying to get them to change direction, consider an alternate view, the best way you can do that is to bring a request or a suggestion in an organized way. Show how, in an organized fashion, how doing an alternate something will have a positive effect, and you have a greater chance of getting what you want accomplished. And again, respect needs to be at the basis for any of that, including interacting with the manager. And then Obviously, with a leader, your approach to interact with them will be different in that a leader is going to see things from the standpoint of people and how they react, the different strengths and weaknesses, and so on. And so you can approach a leader, if you've got someone that's a true leader, you approach them from a human standpoint and offer the suggestion, the change in that fashion. So that's a very nutshell version of how to respond and interact with different types and roles that people use in, especially in the work environment, organizational structure. So hope we've kind of been able to gain some wisdom together today. I know I have certainly appreciated your comments and insights, and I'm always learning from you here on the Wisdom Seeker Live and gaining wisdom from you. So I benefit as much as anybody from having the Wisdom Seeker program, and I'm glad you're here. I appreciate each of you, those that have had to leave and go to work, those that have just sat quietly in the background. Thank you for being here. It is you all that make this valuable, and it is you all that inspire me to keep going. So as we move forward, really consider boss, manager, leader, and how you want to go forward, either interacting or being one. So thanks, everybody. Have an amazing week. For those that celebrating Thanksgiving, I hope your holidays are wonderful and that you have some great memories with your family and friends over the holidays. And I look forward to getting back together with you guys next Monday, 8 a.m. Here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Take care. God bless. See you next time.